Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Kaiju Weekly, the weekly podcast that introduces you to the wide world of giant monster movies. I am your host, Travis, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Tater McDoodles. How are you doing?
Well, okay, so I'm tatering and doodling. I mean, I don't even know how to respond to that.
Oh man, it has been a long week, and I am
You and me both, man. You and me both. I got yesterday. It was 105 degrees here. It was 85 degrees at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I got out to do some work in my I got out to do some work in my yard yesterday. I thought, well, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna start early, and I'm gonna try to be done before early afternoon. And as soon as I stepped out my door, the heat and that muggy heat just smacks you right in the face. Oh God, it was miserable yesterday.
Oh yeah, it has been so rough. And then I'm moving house, and so having to deal with that while also moving and unpacking and packing and everything. It has been ridiculous, but hopefully it's all going to start settling down now. And so we have been recording ahead of time for the last few weeks, and now I think we're finally back on our regular schedule.
Woo! Yay!
So hopefully it stays. Yeah. So hopefully it stays that way for a while.
Yeah.
I need consistency in my life.
And you know what, Travis? We probably picked, not on purpose, obviously, but we probably picked the best day to record our first episode back in real time, because we have some really fun news to talk about.
Yeah, so let's get into the news segment. Let's cue the beady beady.
Cue the beady beady.
All right. So, before we get into the news, though, I want to let everyone know that we are trying something different this week, because instead of doing a long drawn out news segment like we have been doing up until now, we're going to do just one big news item, and the other news items are going to be covered on our Patreon page. So if you are interested in hearing our thoughts on NECA losing the license to the Godzilla franchise, Kamen Rider trending on Twitter, and all the things that happened during Ultraman Day, you can go over to Kaiju Weekly, patreon.com/Kaiju Weekly Pod, and subscribe to our Patreon, because no matter what level that you subscribe at, no matter what level that you contribute at, you will have access to our news segment, our extended news segment. So with that out of the way, let's get into the main news item that we're going to talk about this week. Yeah. And do you want to intro us into it, Michael?
Oh, yes, I do. Because after many months of waiting, finally we have seen an official image of Beardy Kong.
Yes. Now, we've seen Beardy Kong in leaked pictures and leaked things.
Mm-hmm.
But this is an official thing. So,
well, I don't know how official it is, because this did not come directly from Warner Brothers and Legendary. That's true. This came after several people within the kaiju community started digging around, because if you've not seen it already, there was some new toys released. We got to see some new Playmates toys of Godzilla and Kong, and a smaller figure of Kong by Playmates. And but the most interesting part of that is what was shown off on the back of the box, which you would think to yourself, well, the packaging's not that interesting, but oh boy is it, because we got to see an official image of Godzilla and Kong squaring off on, a battleship.
Yes. Now, this is for anyone who watched the what was it? It was a clip that they showed at Brazil, at a Brazil con.
Was it Rio de Janeiro Cinema something or other?
Yeah.
Was it DTX or DX?
Something? Yeah, DX like something. and they showed just like a 5-second clip from Godzilla versus Kong, and this was the scene that they showed. So if you watch that, you already know what the scene looks like. If you didn't watch that, then this is the image. If you look it up, it is Godzilla and Kong standing on a massive, massive battleship, and Kong is heading towards Godzilla with his fist drawn back, ready to knock a lizard out.
Absolutely, he does. And I know a lot of fans were kind of on the fence of whether or not that preview during that festival was like real or not, I guess is what I should say. Because it was a little cloudy. You really couldn't see what was going on. But we assumed it was real because anyone who posted that got a cease and desist notice from Warner Brothers.
Yes.
So that's why we didn't post much about it. That's why we only mentioned it only a few times on the podcast, but we didn't post any images. Apparently people that posted images and the screenshot or the screen video of it, because it was a leaked video, you weren't supposed to take video inside the theater, got their accounts suspended. So we kind of erred on the side of caution, and we didn't really publish that a whole lot because we didn't want to get our Twitter accounts taken down.
Right.
But the image that we got is this high resolution image of King Kong, like you said, Travis, getting ready to punch Godzilla in the face on top of a battleship. Now, I want to say that I want to ask you though, does Kong to you look a little bit shorter, or they look about the same size?
They look about the same size. Now, it may be a perspective thing, but they do look about the same size. Now, I know, Kong was supposed to be a lot bigger, but I was not expecting him to be the same size as Godzilla.
Right. Because the angle that this, and we don't know, I'm going to say this, we don't know if this is a shot from the movie or if just this is an artist rendering from a scene from the movie, because it could very well be just an artist rendering that someone did for the box art. This may not be an actual scene from the movie. That is highly possible that it's not, but it's probably pretty darn close to what we're actually going to see in the film. And in this scene, I noticed that Kong is obviously way bigger, but also Godzilla is stepping up from something, and he's a little bit crouched over. So, which kind of makes me think that maybe Goji's a little bit taller than Kong, which would kind of make sense if they're going to play Kong up to be the underdog in this movie.
Yeah.
But my God, is he beefy? Well, both of them are beefy, but Kong is a beast in this image.
Yeah, and this brings up, again, the internet has decided to spark back up the debate on whether these two monsters should be on a battleship or whether it would sink the battleship. Now, I've never cared that they were on, even back when we saw that original clip and people made a big deal about it. It's not a big deal. This is a fantasy movie because we've got giant monsters, of course. And we had things like what was it, the Argo? That was the giant plane. In King of the Monsters. So having a massive battleship that can handle carrying giant monsters on it just is not outside the realm of possibility in this movie. So I think people need to drop that debate, but it is something that's brought back up now with this image.
Well, I see some people using images of, I think it was Pacific Rim, where they're transporting the bones of a kaiju on top of a battleship, if I'm not mistaken. Was that Pacific Rim? Did I see that correctly?
Maybe. I can't remember.
Yeah. So anyway, for something like this, you sort of have to suspend your belief anyway. So it's not out of the realm of possibility they could create a water Argo, something so massive and that it could hold both of these, one of these, or if not both of these two Titans on top of it. I'm still a little bit iffy on whether it's an actual battleship or not. I want to say that it could possibly be a pier, because we really don't see, unless there's something I'm missing here, I don't see anything that really defines it as like a battleship. It may possibly be like a pier or some kind of water, some kind of seaside base somewhere, possibly Castle Bravo, something of that nature. But yeah, I mean, this image doesn't really tell us a whole lot, but it's interesting enough to get us all talking again. And I think that's going to be the theme over the next few weeks, is we're all going to start debating this again. And the one thing I'm actually pretty excited about is maybe this means we're going to get some daytime battles instead of all nighttime shots.
Yeah, now that's what I'm looking forward to the most in this movie. From what I remember, Adam Wingard, he's the one that's directing it, right?
Yes, Adam Wingard.
Yeah, okay. All right. It's been a long week. I can't remember anything. Yeah, he said on Twitter that you're definitely going to get daytime battles. They're not going to hide the battles, and it's going to be just wall to wall action monster fights. So I'm looking forward to. I am looking forward to it. The image makes me excited. I was already excited, so it's not really changing my excitement. It's just kind of like, come on, just give me the movie. I just want the movie. Yeah. The movie was supposed to already be out now. We were supposed to have already seen this movie.
We would have already recorded our episode about the movie by now.
Yes. But yeah, so let's talk about the Playmates toys though, because that's where this image came from, was from the packaging for these toys. And so we have officially seen now what the Playmates Godzilla and Kong figures are going to look like. And knowing how people reacted to the first run of Playmates toys that we got, do you think these new ones are better than what we got before, or are they on par with those?
No, they're better. I'll say that they're better because, I mean, they're no NECA or SH Monster Arts or anything like that. They're fine, but they do look to be better. Like the one I'm thinking, I think the one that this image was leaked from, they're probably leaked from either one of them, but the one that people referenced a lot was I think it was the 8-inch Kong battle damaged figure, where you just see Kong. It's like it's got a little bit more articulation. It's got some hinges in the arms, wrists, ankles, and knees, I want to say. And I would say his torso and head turns. There's not a whole lot of articulation, but there's going to be some. And he's got a battle damaged piece on his shoulder. Like, it looks like Godzilla just took a big chunk out of his arm. Which I think we were already told that was coming anyway from some of the Funko Pop leaked descriptions as well. We've not seen any figures like that for Godzilla yet. Now we have seen an 11-inch gigantic Godzilla, or whatever they're called, or big Godzilla, or giant Godzilla. There we go. It's Giant Kong, Giant Godzilla, and they're 11 inches tall. And they're just a little less articulation. They're just big figures. And I don't think that these are on par with what we saw before with Playmates. I think they're a lot better. It looks like that Playmates actually refined the sculpts a little bit more. Now there's not a whole lot of detail to these figures, and that's to be expected. They are just kids' toys. I mean, they're not going to invest a whole lot of time in sculpting these if they're just going to be beat up by 8-year-old children,
Right.
And they're just made of probably durable, hard plastic and soft rubber, plastic, whatever. But they look good. I know Chris from GargantuCast was surprised how good they looked, and some other collectors that I've seen post about them in like the Godzilla Collectors Club on Facebook. They were pleasantly surprised on how good these looked, and I'm sure a lot of folks are going to be pleasantly surprised on how good these look. I noticed that Kong is a lot darker than the last Playmates version we got. He's actually more black than brown.
Yeah.
and he's got some of the scarring and of course the beard, and of course his people were kind of commenting about how his face looked really shaven on one side, and I think that's just where his bottom lip shows off that tooth that's coming out from his lower jaw or whatever there. But overall, I think they look fine. I think for what they're supposed to be, they look fine.
Yeah, I think they're good for like you said, for the lower tier figures that are not supposed to be super detailed and super articulated. They're fine. I do wish there was some better articulation, but I think you even mentioned when I mentioned that to you the other day, you said that the higher tier ones will have the more articulation. These are just going to be like the cheaper $20 ones that you get from like Walmart.
And I think, well, they're all going to be available at Walmart, because I think,
well, yeah, true.
I think Playmates I think they have an exclusive deal with Walmart. I'm not 100% sure on that. But the one that the other Kong figure that I'm thinking of is the one with the axe. Am I getting them mixed up? And I looked really close and I'm like, is that a Godzilla dorsal spine? Because it really doesn't look like it.
Yeah, that's the one when that was revealed, or when it was leaked, we were looking at that and trying to figure out whether that was going to be a dorsal fin from Godzilla that he like fashions into an axe or what. So I think that a big part of why we haven't seen very many Godzilla figures, or at least not like the battle damaged ones and stuff like that, where we have gotten from Kong, is that maybe some of the battle damaged Godzilla ones are going to be considered spoilers.
I would say so. And I think we talked about it a few episodes back where I think it was Kayla Howard asked us if the figures were going to spoil anything, or if the figures were going to be delayed. And I said it was possible. Well, that shot that theory out of the water here with these, in particular. But I think you're right about that. I've not seen any like battle damage Godzilla yet, because from what I remember, we're supposed to get a battle damage Godzilla with a big gash down his chest. Mm-hmm. Now we don't know what that's from, obviously, but one can assume that this battle damage Kong with the axe is going to put that axe into Godzilla's chest, and that's where the battle damage comes from.
Yeah.
We already see a battle damage Kong. We've already seen the Kong with the axe. I don't know if a Godzilla with a big gash down its chest was going to be much of a spoiler. It's very, very difficult for someone not to be spoiled these days because of marketing and products like these Playmates toys.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's all we have to say for this main news topic. Again, if anybody's interested in hearing our thoughts on things like Kamen Rider or Ultraman Day or Ultraman's butt on the cover of the upcoming Ultraman comic book from Marvel, check out our Patreon page and give us a subscribe if you're able to, because every little bit that you give us helps us immensely. We really appreciate it. It helps us get better equipment. It helps us have time to edit and everything. So if you're able to, we are so thankful that you can give. And we also hopefully will give you enough content to make it worth your while.
And I want to mention too, really quickly before we get into the main topic, please, if you're please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's Kaiju. It's a youtube.com/Kaiju Weekly. And that's where we post not just the episodes, but we also try to post visuals for the episodes as well. So if you have been living under a rock and don't know what this particular image looks like, I'll post it there. So that's one upside to subscribing to our YouTube channel, because I do post not just the episode audio, but also some visuals to go along with the news segments.
Yeah. Now, it has been a very long week, and with me moving house, I am exhausted and ready to collapse. So let's get into this main topic before I
All right,
collapse here.
let's go for it. Yeah.
So our main topic this week is Orochi, I was going to say the eight-headed dragon. Big boy
perfect.
mini head. That's
right.
Big boy mini head dragon guy, fire breathing guy. From 1990, what was it? 94?
1994.
Yeah, 94.
The year after Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2.
Yeah. We did ask a trivia question last week. But because we record so far ahead, we didn't really get a chance to get anybody's responses to that.
No, that's incorrect. We did get one response that I know of.
No. Are you talking about Nathan?
I'm talking about Nathan because he texted it to me directly.
Okay. Because I was going to say the one that he sent to our group chat was for last week's topic, so I didn't know about the one that he sent for this week. So what did Nathan send us this week? Well, let me ask the trivia question. The trivia question was, which Toho kaiju predates in real life the original Gojira film by over 1,000 years? So what did Nathan send us? I'm excited to hear.
Orochi the Eight-Headed Dragon.
Oh, well, that was anticlimactic.
Oh, yeah. I knew you were building it up, and I'm thinking you're going to be disappointed because you didn't give me a funny answer this time.
Okay. Nathan, you failed us. No, that's all right.
It was a less than stellar Marchand this time.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, our main topic, big boy, mini head, breathe fire. The cast and crew. It was directed by Takeo Akawara. It stars Masahiro Takashima, Yasuko Sawaguchi, Akaji Maro, Yuki Meguro, Saburo Shinoda, Hurricane Ryu Haruken as Kumasugami, which we will talk about. That's one of the kaiju in the movie. We will talk about him in just a minute. And Kenpachiro Satsuma as Yamato no Orochi. So he was as the actual dragon. He was the one in the dragon operating it. So the plot breakdown is, after killing his brother, Prince Yamato is banished from his father's kingdom until he can bring his dangerous powers under control. On his journey, he meets and joins with the priestess Oto, and together they go to fight against an evil kami that has been ravaging the earth in the form of an enormous hydra. Will Yamato ever return home to reclaim his rightful place on the throne? Find out next time on... No. Find out right now. So, what are you... let's talk about our opening thoughts. Now, we'll get into our likes and dislikes and everything in a minute. But what are your opening thoughts on Orochi, big boy, breathe fire, mini heads guy?
It's a movie. Well, I'll just say that it's a movie. Well, okay. So
it definitely has moving pictures. Let me just say that.
It definitely has moving pictures. You are correct. There's definitely some work involved. How much work? Not quite sure. No, I'm making a joke. No, so I went into this movie not really knowing what to expect. I had heard a few things about it, and I had heard mixed comments about it. I think I was speaking with Matt Parmley from Kaiju Transmissions once before, and he mentioned that he really likes this movie. He thinks it's a lot of fun, and I can most certainly see that. Mm-hmm. But it was slightly confusing, and I will admit that I watched the English dub, and I still had trouble following along with what the heck was going
on. Yeah. So now Rob from Tokyo Lives has also said that he found this movie really fun. He thought it
may have been Rob then. It may have been Rob and not Matt.
Yeah. Rob in the Kaiju Quarantine group chat that we have set up for us podcasters, he said that he had a lot of fun with it, and I can see why. I can definitely see why he had a lot of fun with it. There are fun parts in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's everything else in the movie that's that's like, oh, I don't know. I will say, well, I say this in my final thoughts, but I'll go ahead and give a preview. But I think a big part of what makes you enjoy this film or not enjoy this film is whether you know the context or the mythology that a lot of this is based on, because a lot of it is based on stories that have existed in Japan for thousands of years. So if you know those stories, then you don't need to know all the details and stuff going into this, and they definitely don't hold your hand in this movie. But if you don't know any of those stories, man, it could have really used some hand-holding. Oh,
there we go.
I'm so tired. So that's an issue I have with it. But I guess that's not really a problem, because we kind of have the same thing with a lot of Western mythology. You don't really go into a lot of detail explaining who King Arthur is and Merlin, all these things every time you do a movie about, King Arthur. And that's kind of the same way that this movie is. It is like a Japanese King Arthur story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that if you are Japanese, you know this story already, so you're just having fun watching it play out. Whereas us as not Japanese people are like, wait, what? What's going on?
Or I think you equated it to, and I agree with you, it's very close to Clash of the Titans.
Oh yeah. That's really what I think. It is a very much like a Japanese version of Clash of the Titans. And yeah, I think it's good. So let's stop beating around the bush and let's get into our likes and dislikes. So
okay. All right.
Let's get into some positive things. We're going to make a positivity sandwich. We're going to start with the things that we like, then we're going to get into the things that we don't like, and then we're going to finish on a couple of things that we do like.
Okay. Sounds fair.
So let's get into some of the things that we do like. What are some things that you like about this movie?
Well, I'm going to start by saying I like how different this movie is than some of the other Toho films that we're used to.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is feral Japan. This is thousands of years ago. This is a fantasy story. This is a tried and true sword and sorcery fantasy story, and it's actually a really kind of a nice change of pace. Where kaiju films from Toho up to this point were very very based on science for the most part,
mm-hmm.
And very modern, and especially some of the Godzilla films in this era, in the 90s, the Heisei era, were based on science and sort of taking place in the modern day and with modern equipment and things. And it's just a really nice change of pace. I've seen very few sort of the more what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of like the more fantasy films other than the Godzilla franchise films, or that kind of exist within that continuity where they're more modern.
Right.
This is my first, if not, I think this is my first fantasy, like actual fantasy story from Toho, and I actually quite enjoyed that about it. It was definitely different.
Yeah. I do like that this is kind of one of those heroic epics like you might get from a Harryhausen during like his time period when he was doing Jason and the Argonauts, or Sinbad. You get one of these big epic adventure stories, but with kaiju, and I think that's really interesting. And it goes back to what I have said quite a few times on this podcast, is that kaiju can be done in so many different ways. It's a genre of filmmaking or film that can be done in so many different styles and tones and everything. And the Japanese filmmakers are great at doing that, like, because you have kaiju films that are just pure ridiculous comedies. You have kaiju films that are examinations of political ideals and a satirization of modern life. Then you have epic adventures, you have horror movies, you have all that stuff that the Japanese cinema seems to embrace the variety that comes from the kaiju genre. Whereas in America and in other Western cultures, we tend to just think of giant monster movies as one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And all of our giant monster movies tend to feel the same way. They don't really differ from each other that much. So that's really one thing I'm like you. I really like that about this movie, that it is so different from other kaiju films that you might be used to if you've only watched Godzilla and Gamera and Mothra.
Right.
One thing that I really liked was there's a line at the end of this movie. And I know it's at the end, so I know we're jumping ahead to the end, but there's a line where one of the commies says, well, kami are just like that. And it's like, meh, that's what we do. That's kind of like a shrug of like, because like, oh, he'll come back at some point. Maybe next time he'll be a good guy. Talking about the evil kami. And it's like, it's such a funny kind of almost humorous, but not necessarily meant to be humorous line that I actually kind of liked.
Did you watch the sub or the dub?
I watched the sub.
Okay, so you watched the sub. Now it's the same thing in the dub, because I know the scene you're talking about. They just defeated the dragon. Everything's good. We're about ready to end the film, and the commie's like, "Yeah, we're just good like that.
Yeah,
we're just like that. It's just sort of it sounds so nonchalant. Like there was no bloated or epic language like one day we will return and blah 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 blah, and it's stuff that you would typically expect from sort of a medieval sword and sandal epic like this,
right?
Where they did some epic monologue at the end, saying, telling the audience, why the hero was virtuous, but be warned, someday the villain will come back again to do more evil things. I mean, it was just sort of like a yeah, we're just good like that, and then move on. It was just it was funny and kind of jarring at the same time, because it's not really quite what you would expect for the ending of a film like this.
Right.
So yeah, I totally get why you picked that as a like, because it was just kind of.
I think it shows also the difference in culture, because if we, in a Western point of view, an American point of view, if a movie ended like you said, and they said, "Oh, one day the villain will come back," and it's just so like, the threat is looming over them of him coming back. But in Japanese mythology, kami are not universally good or evil all the time. Sometimes they do, sometimes they're more just annoyances than they are pure evil and stuff. And sometimes they go from being good to bad, or good to bad, to worse, to evil, to whatever. And so to me, yeah, it is culturally, if you're a Japanese person who knows, the mythology and everything, then you're like, yeah, this fits in with the mythology that they've built in this movie. But from an American hearing that, it was kind of jarring, and it was kind of funny, and I do like that. So I like that. I wanted to highlight that line in particular.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. Because it stuck out to me too. I was going to put it in my notes, but honestly, I just kind of forgot. So yeah, I'm glad you pointed it out.
Now, do you want to get into some of the dislikes that we have for the movie?
Oh boy, yeah. Let's go into that, and I will start by saying they could have probably, the pacing for this movie was not the best. No. And they could have probably cut out about 15 to 20 minutes or so, I would say.
And the funny thing is, they cut out about 20 minutes of this film in pre-production, and it's still come out as long and meandering as it did. It's so meandering.
Like some of the they spent like 15 minutes on horseback, just riding through the countryside.
Yeah. And in some ways, that is kind of like it does take you back to a time period in film when they would spend more time just kind of dragging out those scenes of riding on horses, walking from one place to another. But
Mm-hmm.
but by the 90s, we had moved on from that style. So I wonder if this was intentionally meant to be a throwback to those fantasy epics like that.
Maybe. And it would be kind of excusable if the rest of the film didn't have issues.
Yeah. I'm definitely not excusing it being meandering. I definitely felt like this movie was very bloated, very meandering, and very convoluted. And I don't mean that in a like it's confusing. I actually, because I have studied some Japanese history and some Japanese mythology, I actually did follow the story pretty well. Like, I did not have any trouble following the story.
Right.
But it was convoluted in that it was like, well, we go over here and do this. Now let's go over here and do this. Now let's go over here and do this. Now, and it's just like, it's not really interconnecting. The different parts of it are not interconnecting in a cohesive beginning, middle, and end. It's more of like, here's a small story, and then here's a small story that finishes up the whole thing. So what do you think? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Where we're used to in the West with a movie like this, where you see some of those transitionary scenes, like they do the story setup, they set up why they're going on this mission, and then you see maybe one or two scenes of them traveling, and then they just end up at the place they're going to end up so they can continue what the actual purpose of this movie is. And I'm with you. It does feel drawn out, and it jumps from one spot to the other way too quickly. Like the battle between the fire demon, cannot remember what its name is, and then it immediately, not even maybe 5 or so minutes, jumps straight into the battle with the sea monster. I mean, it just feels, it's just, I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to sort of take you on this journey of all these different lights and these different quests that he needs to go on to become the hero. But they could have taken their time just a hair in certain parts and cut. Yeah, that they could have just taken their time in just in a couple parts, so it doesn't feel so breakneck and confusing to me. And I hope that's coming across. I hope that's coming across, listener. What I'm trying to say there.
I have no idea if I'm making any sense or not because I'm so tired. I am just like, I don't even know. I may be making less sense than the movie actually made. But I that's my chief complaint with the movie. The acting in it, some of the acting is good. Some of the acting, little too hammy, too cheesy, even for this type of movie.
That's to be expected, though, with a movie like this, though.
Yeah, but I don't know. And I think also, of course, because it's a Japanese film in the 90s, they had to make it be a soap opera on top of it by adding this whole love dynamic, which is not, I mean, I'll get into it in the fun facts segment, but like, this is based on real mythological stories in Japan. So the love story between Yamato Takeru and Oto is, what he did have a wife in the original stories, but it's just like the way they played it out was more soap opera-y, which was a trend in Japan because Japan did start making a lot of Japanese soap operas and stuff, and so and these love stories and everything that was very popular at the time. So yeah, that I didn't really like that all that much. But I did like some of the side characters a lot. Like their two companions that from the shrine that follows. Takeru.
Yeah, they were fun.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun. I really enjoyed them. I enjoyed the acting from the main bad guy who's Orochi. He has a different name, but when he's in his deity form, kami form, but when he's Orochi. But the acting from him is really good. So yeah, there is good acting in here, but there was just moments where it just went a little too cheesy and too hammy. But like you said, we can't really expect too much from this type of movie. That's just to be expected.
Right. So Travis, let me ask you, since this is a kaiju podcast, what did you think about the creature design?
Well, that's what I wanted to get into with our sandwich. I wanted to finish on the kaiju. So that's a good place we can transition into finishing up our likes and dislikes with talking about the kaiju. So let's go through them one at a time, because that's what I was wanting to do. The first kaiju we see in the movie is the bird, the white bird phoenix.
The white bird from heaven is what I think it's
right.
Called.
Yeah. It's I mean, it doesn't really do much, but it's there.
It reminded me a lot of is it Jason and the Argonauts that has the mechanical owl?
No, that's Clash of the Titans.
Clash of the Titans. Okay, so that's what it kind of reminded me of.
Yeah, it actually, and it does look a little mechanical and kind of like a almost like a steampunk looking bird, which is one thing I did really like about this movie, even though it was set during this like olden days time period of Japan. When it came to the kaiju and the kammis and things like that, they added almost like a sci-fi element to them. Like the ice crystals that Orochi was trapped in, whatever his real name is, but almost looked like a spaceship, and the bird looked almost mechanical, like a robot. And so I kind of liked that they were adding a little bit. It was like it was fantasy, it was mythology, but it also had a little bit of sci-fi in there, and I like that. And the bird is a good example of that. Right. Now, the fire monster, the lava monster that we see in it, what did you think of that one?
I thought that was a lot of fun. I really did. I like the design of it. It reminded me a lot of, what is that kaiju's name? Malagor from the Turbo movie.
Oh, yeah.
Which would later turn into Dark Spectre. Am I right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, I thought he was really cool looking. And for description purposes, it's basically just this big muscular lava rock looking humanoid creature that can coincidentally transform his appendages into weapons, which I thought was a really nice touch.
Yeah, I like that he turned his one hand into a bow and then his fingers into arrows and was like launching them out. That was really cool.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, the animatronics on it are really good too, because it is it's a guy in a suit, but the animatronics of the mouth are actually really good, in how the mouth moved and the detail in its movements and stuff was really, really well done.
Right. It was. I mean, it was. I thought the actual excuse me. I thought the actual suit design was really well done. Nothing seemed too wonky or out of place, in my opinion. The CGI that kind of that transformed his arms into weapons. Well, it's dated, it's dated, but it looked pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was dated, but with the way that they did it, it didn't seem too out of place. So yeah, it worked. It worked. The next kaiju that we saw in the film was the sea monster that Takaru and Oto fight. What do you think of that one?
This was my least favorite of the two that we've seen so far. I think in total there are technically 5 kaiju in this movie, counting the bird from heaven. So this is probably my least favorite of the set of kaiju we got. It just looked like a generic reptilian or amphibian like sea monster. There's really not a whole lot to describe it.
It looked well in the face and body. It does kind of look a little generic, but I like that it has fins. It has kind of a piranha looking face, but it also has tentacles that come out and can like grab you and stuff. So it has like a mixture of multiple different types of sea creatures, and I
It
think
kind of
that
reminded you of what is the name of the Ghidorah from Return of Mothra 2, the one that lives in the ocean.
I can't remember.
I can't remember it either, but it reminds you in the return in Rebirth of Mothra 2, there is a Ghidorah that lives underwater, and it's got fins and it looks very aquatic. And this is what that kind of reminded me of.
Yeah, was it Dagara?
Dagara, maybe, yeah, or Dagora, or is
No,
that
no, it's Dagara. Dagara, Dagahra.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. That's the one. Yeah, it does look a lot like Dagara from Rebirth of Mothra. It does kind of look like that. Yeah, it wasn't anything special, but I didn't mind it. I liked it. You know, it was still fun. Then we get into Yamata no Orochi, the Eight-Headed Dragon. So, what did you think? And now he made appearances throughout the movie in like little flashes and stuff, but we do get to see him at the end of the movie fully formed.
Right.
What did you think of this puppet or this kaiju?
It is an impressive effect, I have to say.
Yeah.
Because it is an 8-headed dragon, so that already God knows how many wires and things they had to do to keep all those heads straight. It's got a guy in the suit, and I think the suit is on wheels to give it mobility. It looks like it looks sort of like Heisei King Ghidorah, but with 8 heads and it's red. It's what it sort of reminded me of. And if I'm not mistaken, some of the like Ghidorah is described as sort of a young Orochi. Like it's a not fully evolved Orochi kaiju or Orochi dragon. Which I can see that. But overall it's a very impressive piece. Like all the heads move fairly good together. It doesn't, I mean, obviously it's probably hard to keep all 8 heads straight at one, you know, and looking natural if you're going to do it like tokusatsu style. But it was really impressive. Like the actual flamethrowers they put in its mouth to spit actual fire, and it wasn't CG.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to get into. This is one of the rare times that Toho actually used real fire in its monster breath, because Toho usually doesn't do. They've done it a few times, but they usually stick to After Effects, some kind of After Effect, to do a fire breath. But
and I'm wondering I'm wondering if it was because there were so many heads, it was going to be difficult to keep them all straight.
Yeah.
And plus, you know, to do it via CG like that, I mean, that costs money. And if they're going to try, if they're going to try to keep the budget fairly low for this, it's going to cost them money to do breath effects for all 8 of those heads. Now, I think a couple of the heads did show they had eye lasers, and we'll get to that in a second when we get to the final battle.
Yeah. And, you know, something else too, they also built a full-size head, at least one full-size head for the actor who plays Takaru to interact with and fight with. And that effect was great and worked great. And I think the transition from the actual full-size model to the head that's gigantic because it's the size of the actor, that transition actually worked really well.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought it looked really good. They did some maybe some matting there. When our main character climbs on top of Orochi's head and starts stabbing him with the sword, you see the other heads in the background. It looks pretty natural. I'm not. You can obviously tell it's been superimposed, like it's a green screen or something like that. But
right.
But it looks pretty good. I like the puppeteering on Orochi a lot. I thought it was super impressive. In fact, just as impressive, I'd say, is even Biolante, which is a very impressive effect in herself.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think this is on par with the Biollante effect because I think that this does, and I think a lot of because Biollante is filmed at night and in the
Mhm.
dark a lot, whereas this was daytime. You saw it clear.
Right.
So I think that this actually has a little bit of a edge on even Biollante because they could not hide any defects in this, but it looked great.
Yeah, and they did a really great job of hiding some of the wheels that caused it to be more mobile. I think
Hmm.
they hid those pretty well with a lot of like smoke and debris under
Hmm.
at the foot of the kaiju. It didn't look it didn't look bad at all. I've heard other podcasts and people talk about how bad this particular effect looked, except for the heads themselves. And I just don't think that's fair because it really is an impressive effect.
Oh yeah, and an impressive puppet, like you said, 8 heads, having to move them around and having to do all that. Like it is super impressive. The final quote unquote kaiju that we get is the warrior sun kami that it's when Takaru basically grows gigantic and takes on this Mecha Godzilla is what he was. He kind of he became a giant mecha winged warrior thing
Mhm.
to fight Orochi. What did you think of that?
Well, it was beautiful. It was a beautiful suit design, I thought.
Hmm.
It's this big, sleek, mechanical looking samurai. Um, I almost wanted to call him a mech, but he's not a mech. He's supposed to be an actual knight
Right.
slash, god. So I can't really call him a mech, although he does look like a mech, and you can kind of tell where they've kind of spliced together pieces of Mechagodzilla from 1993 into the suit, which I think looked really well. And I think I even told you, um, like it was last night or something when I was watching this. You can see Mechagodzilla. Well, after I went back and looked at it again today, you really can't tell too much, but you can tell some, like in the arms and in the knees, like in sort of the
Yeah.
torso region, what they've done. But that's not uncommon for Toho to do that. But
Oh no.
overall, I thought that this particular suit design looked super impressive. And I know a lot of folks have a problem with it not actually having a face. It's just got a helmet and then just sort of a blank space where the face would be implied.
Hmm.
But I think that kind of works in its favor. And I think you pointed out when we were talking privately how it looks a lot like Daimajin.
Yeah. Yeah. It does look a lot like Daimajin or Daimajin. It also looks a lot like if anybody who's not familiar with this movie but knows Digimon, if you know Serafimon, which is
Mm,
the mega digivolution of Anjamon and Patamon, he looks a lot like that. He even has the gold wings. I think the gold wings and the silver and the little gold accents, along with the jewels and like rubies and sapphires and everything that he's encrusted with, it just all looks amazing. And the fact that we have this humanoid monster, for a lack of a better word, fighting Orochi at the end, I think is really cool. I think it was a really good final battle.
yeah, I think it was excellent. I think it was excellent because they hid the now the mech, whatever it was called. What was it called again? I'm sorry.
It is called, let me see, Ikusagami.
Yeah, we can cut that out.
Yeah.
So in the final battle, when he's kind of laying it to Orochi, you really don't see a whole lot of the wires and stuff that they use to probably hoist him up to make him fly. I think the battle itself was fairly believable, and that effect combined with the Orochi effect, I think the final battle of the film looks great.
Yeah. Well, that is one thing I do want to say while we're still in some positives. The action in this movie is really good. I think the fight scenes with the humans are really good. I think the fight scenes with the kaiju are really good. I think that especially my favorite part is what I was calling the Power Rangers moment, where where Takaru and Oto face off against the main bad guy in his kind of lair on the moon, and that and the swords glow and make the lightsaber sounds.
Yeah, that was definitely some Japanese lightsabers.
Oh, it was great though. I loved it. I love that scene was so good.
It
It
even had
was,
the light. I think you pointed out it even had the lightsaber sounds like the
yeah, the wong wong sound. Yeah, it was so good though. I love that scene. Yeah. So overall, and we'll get into final thoughts. I think this movie is a lot of fun and has some very fun moments. There's some really, really just slow and meandering and kind of just boring middle parts in between the fun parts that's hard to sit through.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot here that I think people who are in love with sort of this sword and sandal genre are going to enjoy. If you're going into this movie expecting just a traditional Toho giant monster movie, you're not really going to get that here. You are going to get a lot more giant monster action than say something like Atragon, which we covered a couple of weeks ago. And maybe even the Mysterians and some of the older Toho films. You are going to get a whole lot more action as far as the kaiju go, but you kind of have to go into this movie knowing what to expect, where this is not a modern Toho, and I say modern as in it's not set in the modern day as like a Godzilla film during the Heisei period would be. It is definitely a period piece. So if you're someone who loves period pieces, you're probably going to like this movie, even with its faults. And I think if you like this genre of film, even just a little bit, you're going to probably look over those faults anyway and still have a good time with this movie.
Yeah. Getting into fun facts. Now, I have a few fun facts. One fun fact we mentioned already: the suit for that warrior kaiju kami thing that fights Orochi at the end was a repurposed Mechagodzilla from Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. So that is the Heisei Mechagodzilla that was repurposed. We mentioned that already, but I just wanted to reiterate that. Right. Also, this movie was originally going to be part of a trilogy, but because Rebirth of Mothra started doing poorly, the movies weren't getting the return that they wanted on them, they decided to cut out the trilogy and just make this a standalone film. Right. Now, this film is a loose remake of The Three Treasures, which was an old Toho movie.
Yeah.
And
we'll cover maybe The Three Treasures at some point. I really wouldn't classify The Three Treasures as a kaiju film per se.
Yeah, it's not really a kaiju film, but Orochi does make an appearance in it. So yeah, it does have a kaiju in it. One thing though, I talked about knowing the context of this movie helps in watching it, because for me, when I watched it, knowing some of the history and some of the mythology behind it did help a lot. So I wanted to get into some of that. Now, in Japan, Yamato Takaru is an actual figure in their history and mythology. He's actually the son of the 12th emperor of Japan. And he was born somewhere around 72 CE and died somewhere around 114 CE or AD. Now, what's interesting is that he is kind of like the Japanese version of King Arthur, where there's a lot of stories of his exploits, but it's not a linear story. It's just like, well, here's an adventure that Takaru went on. Here's another adventure that Yamato Takaru went on. And some of those adventures were transferred into this story or into this movie, but not everything in this movie is something that is from that original story and mythology. Some of the things that were part of the original Takaru story, him sneaking into a opponent's base or stronghold by cross-dressing as a dancer / maid. That's an actual story. Which I think was actually a fun scene. But dude, don't glare at the warlord while you're trying to hide your identity. He's sitting there dressed. He's a 6 foot tall man among 5 foot tall women, and he's trying to pretend to be a woman while also giving the death stare to the warlord.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh, it's so great. Now legend says that he did come into possession of the Kusanagi, which is the sword that is taken from Orochi's tail, and that is actually part of Japanese folklore and in mythology, that the Kusanagi, the sword, is taken from Orochi. That is part of Takaru's story, that he came into possession of that sword, and also that he lost his wife to a sea monster was also part of it.
Okay.
But as far as my research goes, there's nothing in here that says that he faced off against the Moon Kami, which is who the main bad guy was. In fact, in our Japanese mythology, Orochi and Tsukuyomi, which is the Moon Kami, in the movie, they're the same person. It's just two different versions of two different forms that he takes. Mm-hmm. But in Japanese mythology, they are not the same. It's two totally different things. Also, something that's really interesting is the Imperial Regalia actually makes an appearance in this. Now, the Imperial Regalia are the 3 treasures. It's the 3 items that represent the Imperial family's right to rule Japan.
The 3 that's the 3 lights that we mentioned in the movie, right?
Yeah. Now, one is the Kusanagi, which is the sword, and one is the jewel that Takaru was wearing, and one is the mirror. Now, these treasures are actually still part of the Japanese ceremony when a new emperor takes the throne. In fact, in 2019, when the Reiwa emperor took the throne, they were presented to him as a token to show that he was being enthroned as the new emperor.
And these are the same. They probably pass down the same emblems generation to generation, I'm assuming.
Well, that's debated, because what happened was, first of all, the Imperial Regalia is supposed to have been handed down from Amaterasu, which is the sun goddess, to the original emperor. Now, whether that actually happened, people can make up their own mind. But during the Genpei War, which was a war between the Taira and the Minamoto clans of Japan, the Taira took the 8-year-old emperor, he was only 8 years old at the time, and they took the regalia with them. Now, during a sea battle, the regalia were lost. Now, according to tradition, the mirror and the jewel was recovered from the water after the battle sometime later. But the sword, the Kusanagi, was never found. And so what is presented is actually supposed to be a replica of it. Now, there are some people who claim, from my research, that they did find the Kusanagi when they went diving for it, but traditionally, what is accepted as the originals are the mirror and the jewel, whereas the Kusanagi, the sword, is not.
Okay.
But yeah, they're just meant to represent the imperial right to rule Japan. So that's just, to give a little context and history to this movie that has a lot of mythology and a lot of history involved in it. And I'm not even going to get into the barbarians that they were fighting and how that's probably the Ainu or another group that was natives to, because the Yamatos, the actual Japanese, were not the original people from the archipelago. They came there and they basically did what Europeans did to the Native Americans in North America. So there's a whole history lesson there that if anybody's interested in, check out Monster Island Film Vault, because he dives into that kind of stuff in some of his analysis of films.
Is there an article where you pulled some of this information from, Travis, that I can kind of link to? We can put a link to in the episode, so that if people are interested in knowing the backstory before they watch this movie, they can find it.
I will send you some links to some YouTube videos. Now, there's a YouTube channel that I really enjoy watching because he goes into Japanese history and Japanese mythology, but he does it with a level of humor. Like, he's really funny, and his videos are really short, and his name's Lymphemy. So I'll send you a link to that. That's where I encourage people to go to find more information. So that's it for the fun facts. So let's get into our Godzuki scores and our final thoughts on this movie. So we like to score our movies, for anybody who's new. Oh, please don't be new and just start listening with this episode, because it is a loose, crazy episode. But we like to score our movies out of Godzukis instead of out of stars, because we like to pay homage to the great Godzuki, who was Godzilla's bumbling nephew from the Hanna-Barbera cartoon. And so we pay homage to the great Godzuki by using him as a yardstick for our movie ratings. So out of 5 Godzukis, what do you give Orochi the Eight-Headed Dragon?
2.5 out of 5. So I was 50-50 on this one. Like I said, I think I talked about it in just a few minutes ago. It's a fun movie. If you like period pieces, if you like sort of the sword and sandal period pieces, like what we would get with a Harryhausen film, like Jason and the Argonauts, or Clash of the Titans, the Voyage of Sinbad, stuff like that, you're probably gonna like this movie. Now, I will say that it even with, I watched the dub, and it was still, for me, a little bit confusing, but I think that's mainly because I'm not familiar with Japanese mythology as much as I am, say, American, Greek, or Roman mythology, because that gets touched on a lot if you watch, say, Clash of the Titans and some other Harryhausen films. So I'm more familiar with that than I am Japanese mythology, and it does get a little bit confusing. But just on its surface, I will say that Orochi the Eight-Headed Dragon is a pretty fun movie. Now, there are parts that go on a little bit longer than they should, and we touched on that earlier in the episode. But overall, it's about 100 minutes of your time. It's not a huge investment. I say, if you're interested in period pieces and want something different outside of the more traditional kaiju films like what we got with Godzilla in the Heisei era, I say go for it. Watch it and tell us what you thought about it.
Yeah, and as far as my Godzuki score, I give it a 2.52. I'm right there with you. I'm about halfway, because, yeah, I do feel like in ways this movie is very bloated and kind of meandering.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there is a lot of fun to be had with this movie, and I think that you hit the nail on the head when you said that if you like those Harryhausen films that were the sword and sandal style, Jason the Argonauts, Clash of the Titans, you will enjoy this movie. But just like most Harryhausen films, the biggest talking point for this movie is the special effects.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Is the creature effects, because the majority of what makes this movie fun is the creature effects, is the special effects in it. Everything else, some of it's okay, some of it's not so great, but the creature effects are outstanding. And I think that if you, like you said, if you like that kind of stuff, you'll enjoy it. I think it's worth watching. I think every kaiju fan should watch it. I'm not promising that every kaiju fan will enjoy it, but I think every kaiju fan should watch it just to get something different.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. Now, I'll be honest, is it going to be something I'm going to reach for in a week when I just want to sit down and watch a movie? No. But will this be the only time I ever watch it? No. I will probably watch this movie again, although I kind of got to be in the mood for a period piece when I do. And that's just really how I feel about it.
I got to be in the mood. You know what this is? This movie to me touches or hits the same buttons that some of the like Hong Kong kung fu movies do.
Yeah.
Like it does feel a lot like a Hong Kong kung fu movie, but with kaiju in it.
I think Enter the Dragon, that kind of comes to mind a little bit, although I've not seen Enter the Dragon in forever.
Yeah.
But I know what you're saying. Sort of the kung fu lot movies with very little story but lots of action. That's this kind of movie.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so that's it. So if anybody, if you watch Orochi and you have a different opinion, or if you have the same opinion, let us know. Hit us up at Kaiju Weekly on Twitter or kaijuweekly@gmail.com. You can let us know what
Absolutely.
you think.
Yeah, this was definitely a fun way to end Titans of Toho month for sure.
Yeah, it definitely was because and that's I didn't even mention that this was the final film in our Titans of Toho month, and I wanted to finish on a movie that wasn't a Toho movie that immediately jumps out to people when you think Toho kaiju films.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something different, and so that's why I picked this one. So we can get into the next segment of the podcast. Do you know what it's time for?
Time for the mailbag.
Yeah, time for the mailbag.
What's in the mail today?
All right, so you can send us your own mail to kaijuweekly@gmail.com, or you can tweet us at Kaiju Weekly on Twitter. You can also follow us on the Kaiju GROUPIE Facebook group and send us messages through that, because we are on there and you can always get in touch with us through that. We have a question from one of our Patreon supporters.
Okay.
From Thorax. Thorax, we love you so much. You're always interacting with us online. You support us on Patreon. So we want to tell you how much we appreciate you. And he sent in a letter. And he said, Travis, specifically talking to me, considering you're a Kamen Rider fan, how would you rate Akiji Kobayashi's performance in the original show? P.S. Kind of crazy how Akiji Kobayashi starred in the first Ultraman and the first Kamen Rider. Now, if anybody's not familiar with Akiji Kobayashi, in Ultraman, he plays the captain in the original Ultraman 66. He's the captain, and he's also in Kamen Rider. He's in the first Kamen Rider series, and I think he actually continues to be a part of Kamen Rider even in later series. He shows up. He's also been in a few Godzilla movies, including what was it? He was in Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, the Heisei film, and Godzilla versus Mothra.
He was also in GMK.
And also in GMK. Yeah, so he's an actor that's been around in a lot of the kaiju tokusatsu things.
He's the guy I want to say gives us that fantastic line, at least in the English dub. I think it's in the Japanese dub as well. What is this, a monster convention?
Yeah, he's great. I love that actor, and I he is one of my favorite parts of the original Ultraman series. Mm-hmm. Him and Ide are the only reason that I keep coming back to Ultraman, that OG Ultraman, and keep watching it, because I just love the two of them. Everyone else, I could live without, but those two I really like.
Even Hayata.
I do like Hayata. But for me, it's Ide and Cap are the two that stand out the most. But I am a bigger fan, and I think we even talked about it when we were doing our Patreon recording, that I am a bigger fan of Kamen Rider than I am of Ultraman. So seeing the same actor in Kamen Rider, which is the other huge franchise in Japan. The fact that he's in both of them is amazing to me, and I think he's great in Kamen Rider, and I love seeing him there. And every time he's on there, and he kind of plays, he is a scientist, teacher, kind of mentor to the actual Kamen Rider in the original series, and he's good. He's really good. Now, you said you've started watching the original Kamen Rider. You've watched at least a few episodes.
I've watched a few episodes only to check out and see what the original series of Kamen Rider was like. I enjoy it, but I'm going to say that this question is a little bit above my pay grade because he's asking some very specific questions here that I think you're going to be you're more of the expert in.
Well, you didn't. You would have watched the first episode, right, of Kamen Rider?
Yeah, I watched. I think it was the very first episode. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Okay, so you would have seen this actor. You would have, maybe you didn't recognize him, but and you've definitely watched the original Ultraman.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so he's one of my favorite actors. When I see him in a kaiju film, or when I see him in one of these tokusatsu series, anytime, even when he's just a guest star on there, like, just a guest appearance on there, I really enjoy it. I think he was a great actor. So he's definitely a great addition to Kamen Rider, that original Kamen Rider series. And if you're a fan of him in Ultraman, then you'll definitely love him in Kamen Rider. All right, so I hope I was able to answer Thorax's question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Thorax, for sending us a comment. I mean, if anyone else out there wants to send us a comment or just tell us how much they love the show, how can they do that?
Well, again, like we said, you can follow us on Twitter at Kaiju Weekly. Send it to us there, kaijuweekly@gmail.com. You can also do it at the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group. You can also leave us a review on iTunes, and we will read that out as well. Let us know how we're doing. And so next week, I don't have a trivia question written down, because next week we're going to be doing a very special Gamera themed episode.
We are.
And to celebrate the release of the Arrow Blu-ray set. So I don't have a trivia question, but if anybody wants to reach out to us and tell us what your favorite Gamera film is, or what you enjoy about Gamera, or what you're looking forward to with maybe getting into Gamera, let us know, because I'd love to hear that. And so that's what you can do instead of a trivia question this week.
Right, absolutely. And if you're not into Gamera yet, just ask us, and you want to get into it, but you're not quite sure, ask us, I don't know, why would we choose Gamera over some other franchise in the kaiju genre? How about that?
Yeah, ask us some questions. Talk to us about Gamera, because next week's just a big Gamera celebration. So that's going to be it for this episode. So before we go, I just want to say thank you to everyone for listening. If you want to follow the podcast again on social media, we already listed out our social medias. Go do that. Also, you can check out our Instagram. You can follow Michael on Twitter at Kaiju Groupie Pod, and on Instagram at the Kaiju Groupie. And we also want to say a big thank you to Brian, Shijir, Thorax, Alex, and Michael, for supporting us on Patreon. If you want to support us on Patreon, you can do that at patreon.com/Kaiju Weekly Pod. And until next time, I'm going to say, help control the 8-headed snake population. Have your Orochis spayed or neutered.
Bye, guys.
Bye.